Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Josefine Meets. And today I'm here with Jessica Tomac, and I'm super excited about this episode because we are going to talk about financial planning and the things that we might not always want to talk about or think about, but there are so necessarily to do if we want to achieve financial freedom. And I also want to talk a little bit about financial freedom, what that can look like. And I know it looks like differently for each and every one of us, but I would like to talk to Jessica about her view on it. And I'm going to give you the floor, Jessica, so that you can introduce yourself, what it is that you're doing, and where you're coming from a little bit.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Josephine. I appreciate you having me on the podcast today. I am a financial advisor with Edward Jones, and I really got into the business for one main reason. I had wanted help with my finances, trying to figure out what does it look like to plan for my future, and had hired 5 different financial advisors, firing them all because they didn't understand what I was asking, or I felt like I couldn't ask questions, or I felt like I was an inconvenience. It really didn't feel like they wanted to help. They wanted to take my money, but they really didn't want to talk to me. So after the 5th one, I finally decided I can do this and I can help other people and I make a difference. So I've really built my business on helping women and business owners know what their money is doing for them today and then what they can expect from it in the future. That is what I do.
That is, it's actually quite cool because people say, well, when you see a need, then use that and start building a business around that. But I guess for you, it was probably a bit scary to take that step first too. So what were your thoughts about taking the leap of faith and starting your own business?
Yeah, it was so scary. And I think it all starts even before that. There are mental mindsets around money and finances. I did not grow up with money. My parents struggled. They were young adults with children, and we didn't have extra. And so watching them struggle living paycheck to paycheck, it was really difficult. And I knew I didn't want to be like that, but I wasn't exactly sure how to not have it happen. Right.
Mm.
So I would work, I would save, and then I went to college and I left with a lot of student loan debt. So I worked 2 full-time jobs and paid off my debt. But that was when I was seeking the financial advice, and people were like, oh, you don't have enough money, or whatever reason, it didn't want to help. When I finally got myself in a financial position that I felt like, okay, it's super scary, but I could not get paid, for several months, and I would still be able to eat. Now we're be eating, ramen noodles or, mac and cheese, but we weren't going to starve to death because I'm the sole supporter for my family. So super scary. But I think when you make that decision and you know that your livelihood is based on it, that fear kind of motivates you and I knew if I could help women, it would be super successful. And it has been. So that's been good. And we didn't have to eat beans and rice only, and could afford food along the way. But yeah, just it is very scary when you think about changing careers to something you didn't do. I had to study for the exams. So, and I've made, learning a lifelong process. You could stop with just the 2 tests, but I've continued because I feel like knowledge is power. And the more knowledge I have, the more females and business owners I can help be successful and make more direct plans than just hoping they're doing the right stuff.
Yeah, and I also think in terms of learning that just to get, the reconfirmation that you actually know the right stuff is also super helpful. And also considering how much the market is changing, both in my terms of, business management and in your terms of financial planning, with all the different new products that are coming on the market, there is so much things that we need to know and keep up to date all the time. And I think that is super important to continue invest in ourselves, right? Is that one piece that you would say that when you sit together with your clients, is that one piece that you look into how can they invest in themselves, or is that up to their decision then?
Yeah, so we have discussions on all kinds of things. So my clients, I'm very involved with them. And so depending on where they're at in their life stage, I mean, they call me and say, hey, I need a new lawnmower. Can we do this? And what does this look like? And I have other folks who are like planning their world trip, right? So you've got folks on every end of the spectrum. but really being able to help them identify, hey, this isn't a good choice. People can still choose to do it, right? Like, hey, you shouldn't go take this vacation until this is paid for. If you choose to do it, fine, that's your choice, but we can have those conversations and help guide you.
That's I think that actually comes into this little bit piece which I mentioned in the beginning, the whole financial freedom to be able to buy that new lawnmower when you need one, or to be able to go on vacation when you want one. And I know that you have a process, you have different steps that you take your clients through. What about if we kind of start going through them a little bit so people get a little bit more of an idea of how you help people or women?
Yeah, so step one is really identifying where you are today. You have to really understand your current financial situation. Do you have debt? You know, how much income do you have coming in? What do your bills look like? Really understanding what that first stage looks like. And then we layer on, okay, we know what your necessities are. What are your wants, right? Because we all have this list of wants. And so what does
Mhm.
that look like? And then we even have like this dream, like if I could do anything and had unlimited resources, what would it be that I would be doing, and what does that look like? And then really starting to craft what that plan looks like, whether that's at the basics of budgeting and financial planning, that type of thing, or if it is wealth creation or philanthropy. So it can be any of those on that whole spectrum.
What about money mindset? You briefly touched upon it before when you mentioned about your family, and I come from a family too where we were. You should have a real job so that you could pay your bills. And when I told my mom when I started studying when I was 24, she said, "Why should you want to go study now? You already have a good job." So that was kind of like the frame that I was brought up with, that you get a job and you stick to that for more or less for the rest of your life. So how do you help your clients when it comes to money mindset?
Yeah. So those mindsets, they carry with. I remember when I told my parents I was going to switch careers, and they were like, "Are you nuts? That is the dumbest thing we've ever heard of." Because being guaranteed a paycheck every week, they could not fathom not knowing if you were going to get paid. Like they
Yeah,
were like, you're so irresponsible, right?" And I was like, and
yeah.
now I look back and I laugh and I tell them, was I still irresponsible? They're like, I guess it was an okay choice, right?
Yeah.
But those mindsets, sometimes you just need someone to call you out on it, right? Sometimes you're like, I tell folks, say, well, why was that so easy for you to determine? Well, because I'm looking out, I'm not emotionally invested in it. It's black and white, right? That paper is white, those numbers are black. And I am literally looking at data that's driving results. I'm not the one saying, but I have to have that Starbucks or I have to have whatever. No, I don't care. You have X dollars, and this is what we said you're going to spend it on. And so
Mhm.
sometimes from that higher view of just not being personally invested in this scenario, you can see things very clearly. You see it in your friends and family's lives. You look and say, well, why can't they see that? Like this is so clear as day. The same thing is happening when it's your own money and finances.
Oh yeah, the famous blind spots that we have in various areas in our lives. So what if like the first questions, because you also said that when you came to financial advisors, you had questions and you didn't feel as if you were taken seriously enough, or that they were not really that invested in you. What are the most common questions that you usually get, Jessica?
Probably the most common question is what I'm doing enough, right? Or is it the right stuff? Or
Mm,
it is, I don't even know where to start. Can you give me some direction? Like I don't even know where to
mm,
start. And those
mm,
are probably the two things we see the most coming through when
mm.
folks are just reaching out.
So, if someone comes to you, can they be in any type of situation that they struggle to pay their bills, or is it rather that they already have like a pot of money that they don't really know how to invest it? What are your main clientele?
Yeah. So clientele is a progression, right? So we have some, we call it coaching. I don't
Uh-huh.
charge, it's just part of my giving back to the community and folks, but where we'll say, okay, here's what I want you to do. Here's your next step. And some of them we will follow up with them monthly. Some of them they'll follow up with us when they've completed those things. It's completely up to them how that happens. And then other folks that come to us have already, started their wealth building and are looking for more, higher level counseling on their finances. And so we help with that. So there's a spectrum of folks. They wouldn't necessarily have accounts, but they would be getting guidance if you're on that, hey, I'm just trying to figure out how to get out of debt type of stuff.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that is probably something that I saw on actually on Swedish television, a woman who had taken on. I don't know if you have that in the US, but they have like SMS loans that you can take a
Oh,
new credit. Yeah, and she just added a new credit on top of that new credit and on top of that new credit, and all of a sudden you all have accumulated all of this debt and you don't really know how to get out of it, right? And I think that is probably really, unfortunately, very common, actually.
yeah. And it was more common several years ago before the banking crisis happened.
Mhm, mhm.
And then they kind of tightened in those loaning restrictions. But we did see it loosening up now with the pullback in the economy, banks having issues, right? It's because they're overextending. So
Yeah.
you'll definitely see portions of that happening.
So if we move back a little bit and if we look at someone who might be watching this and maybe they are thinking about maybe I should start a business around financial planning or financial support in any way. How would you or what would be your best tips for that person to do? What steps do you think they should take?
Yeah, so there are a couple of exams that you'll need to take and pass. That's where you start, right? Figure out if that stuff really interests you. I had somebody who said, "Oh, I love people, and so I want to be a financial advisor." And when I was talking, like, "Do you love numbers and like charts and stuff?" and they were like, "Oh no, I hate that stuff." Well, then financial planning is not going to be your thing, right? So really understanding, and I would tell folks to work on your own stuff, right? And see, make sure you enjoy it because it is a lot of work, but it is a lot of rewarding work. But you can study for your 6 and 7 series, and that's the basis to get you started in financial advising.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that is probably one of the things, right? It's a little bit like the coach who says, "Oh, you need to invest in me," but they don't invest themselves. I think it's the same thing that we need to be aligned to what we tell others to do and then also do it ourselves. Not that I'm the best example of doing things all the time, but in general terms to really know what it is that we're talking about, that we have also tried it ourselves, because otherwise how can you advise someone if you don't know what the outcome should be?
And I think that's one of the reasons we've had so much success is I did come out of a lot of debt, right? I did do what
Mm,
it took. I did live on a budget. As my income increased, I continued to live on that very lean budget up until the point that you could create financial security, which is knowing that if you didn't get paid, you're still going to be able to continue your lifestyle as you had it for several months, right? And that's where I want everyone to have that ability to, everything that's on their want list, that they can be having a plan to reach those goals. Life doesn't give you a do-over. It's not all about just saving, saving, saving. It's living now as well, but it's really being mindful of how you're doing it.
and not take on new additional credits to kind of support a lifestyle that we cannot afford in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah. If you
Yeah.
have a phone that's working or you can go get a new phone that's the biggest, baddest, greatest thing ever, but you have to pay, 8% interest for it, then you didn't wait until you have your money to save to go buy it, right? People get
Mm,
into loans at 32% interest. You will never come out of that hole when you're paying that much interest on money. So
mhm.
really understanding that you don't need everything immediately. A lot of times I find folks want stuff that their parents have, after 40, 50, 60 years, but they want it, in the beginning. And it took them time to build that up and have those things. So have a plan.
Yeah, yeah. My youngest son, he wants to have a Rolex watch and a balcony. So we're working on the balcony, but the Rolex he needs to buy himself, not on credit though. But so,
I love
so I
it.
think
So perfect. You can teach him about budgeting for it, income, how much does he have to work, and then he'll figure out if it's really important or not.
I think that is a great kind of way actually, because what our kids have, they have their accounts. My oldest son is 16, so there it's obviously, but the youngest one is also 10, and he gets his monthly allowance and he needs to budget himself. If he wants to buy a new game, he needs to make sure he has the money for it, because only then you can really start learning how money in and money out actually works. And he was
Right.
so proud the other day because he just needed another 3 Swiss francs, that's $3, and then he would hit the $200 mark, or whatever it was. So he was super proud about that moment. Also celebrate those moments a little bit.
Yeah, and then you find once they start seeing that this money is in there, they're like, oh, and then they don't want to spend it. And then they're like, oh, I don't like it when it drops down. I just had a lady telling me how her son had bought something, and then he was like, oh, I don't like how this account looks so low. I'd worked so hard to get it built up. And he was like, I'm going to return it because it wasn't that important. Right. And so those are some of those mindsets of the buyer's remorse, right? Someone who
Mhm.
is just happy by buying stuff and they put their head in the sand and they're not paying attention to their bills. And then the bill comes and they're like, oh, I don't know how it got to be this much. Right. It's
Mhm.
all of those things that you really just have to start to get control over.
If someone is kind of in the starter point of, I want to build my wealth, what are the very first steps that you think someone should start doing?
So, very first step is $1,000 in your bank account, and then elimination of your debt, all debt minus your house. Okay. Once you have that completed, then the next step is 3 months of your living expenses in your bank account. And in that same time, you can be saving for retirement or other financial goals as well, as long as you maintain the $1,000.
I love those are so clear goals. That is so like first $1,000, pay off all the debt, excluding the mortgage that you might have on your house. The next step is accumulate 3 months of expenses that you might have. So before that, we probably need to budget or to figure out how much do we really spend per month. Super clear
Absolutely.
and super actionable goals. Are there any ways that people can speed up this accumulation?
Absolutely. Go get a second job, right? Spend less. Those are the things that speed it up. If you're in debt, pay down. So I liked to rank mine by the smallest debt to the largest. And then I actually wrote them all out with their interest rate and their balance. And then
Mhm.
I would cross them off on I put it on, I printed it and posted it on the front of my refrigerator. And then I would keep paying on them. And when I paid it off, I would cross it off because sometimes when you get to those bigger ones, you feel like it's just not working, right? It is working, but it just takes longer. So if you've had those little ones that were fast wins, you can see the progress faster. The other way that you can tackle the debt is to put it by interest rate order and then pay off on the highest interest rate first and work your way to the lowest interest rate. Sometimes what I find is if you do it that way, that may also be your largest. So you might be working on it for a long time. And then I find people get discouraged.
Yeah, because then it also, you don't see the reduction as visually as if you start with the smallest first, right? Even though from a money perspective, it's probably smarter to start paying off those with higher interest first. But it's also about the small wins and to celebrate the small wins without without adding on to your expenses by the celebrations. But yeah, I definitely think that's amazing actions. Is there anything else, Jessica, that you would like to add?
No, I think that the one thing is a lot of times folks say I'm gonna get to it later, right, with your
Mm.
finances. That is not a good mindset, right? Do it now. Take some small action now. It will change your life moving forward, but you have to get the ball in motion. And so really taking a little bit of time to figure out what's my next step. It doesn't have to be 10 things, but just my one thing that you can work on for the month, for the year, whatever that looks like. So important.
Yeah, definitely. If people want to connect with you and learn more about you, how can they best connect with you? How can they best find you?
Yeah, so they can find me by searching Edward Jones and Jessica Tomac. They can find me on Facebook and on LinkedIn.
And I will make sure I add your contact details underneath this video so that people can just reach out to you. I think this was an amazing episode, Jessica, because there are really clear and actionable steps to take. I will make sure I summarize them too, so that we have them also in the description of this. This was really good. So thank you so much, Jessica, for showing up on the show.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.